The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the rusted remains of the once thriving amusement park. The air was thick with the scent of decay, mingled with the faint, acrid smell of burnt rubber. Shadows danced across the ground as the wind whispered through the skeletal frames of the rides, their long-forgotten laughter echoing in the ears of anyone brave or foolish enough to enter. Jake and Sarah stood at the entrance, their flashlights piercing the darkness. They had heard the stories, the tales of people who had gone missing, the whispers of strange noises in the dead of night. But they were skeptics, thrill-seekers looking for a scare, not believers in the supernatural. "Come on, let's check out the Ferris wheel," Jake suggested, his voice tinged with excitement. Sarah nodded, her grip tightening on her flashlight as they made their way deeper into the park. The Ferris wheel loomed ahead, its once vibrant colors now faded and peeling. As they approached, the wind picked up, causing the creaking metal to groan in protest. Jake shivered but brushed it off as a trick of the mind. They reached the base of the ride, and Jake pointed to the small dilapidated elevator that once ferried maintenance workers to the top. "Let's take a look inside," he said, already prying open the rusted doors. The elevator car was dark and musty, the air thick with dust and the smell of mold. Reluctantly, Sarah followed him inside, the doors screeching shut behind them. The elevator jerked to life, startling them both. They exchanged nervous glances as it ascended, the machinery groaning and clanking ominously. The ride seemed to last an eternity, the darkness outside the small window growing more oppressive with each passing second. Finally, the elevator shuddered to a halt. The doors opened to reveal a narrow catwalk suspended high above the ground. Jake stepped out first, his flashlight sweeping the area. Sarah followed, her heart pounding in her chest. The catwalk wobbled under their weight, the rusted metal creaking dangerously. "Look over there," Jake said, pointing to a small control room at the far end of the catwalk. "Maybe we can find something interesting." They made their way cautiously across the catwalk, the wind howling around them. Reaching the control room, they found the door ajar. Inside, the walls were lined with dusty control panels and faded blueprints. Jake's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and writhe. Sarah's eyes were drawn to a small, weathered journal lying on a desk. She picked it up, the pages yellowed and brittle. Flipping through it, she found entries detailing the park's construction and early days of operation. But as she read further, the tone grew darker. "Jake, listen to this," she said, her voice trembling. "It says here that the park was shut down because of a series of unexplained accidents. Workers went missing and some were found dead, their bodies mutilated." Jake frowned, his excitement waning. "Maybe we should leave," he suggested, but before they could move, a loud bang echoed from the elevator shaft. They turned, their flashlights illuminating the empty catwalk. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake nodded, his face pale. "We need to get out of here, now." They hurried back to the elevator, the wind growing stronger, almost as if it were trying to push them back. As they reached the car, the doors slammed shut with a deafening clang. Panic set in, and they frantically pressed the buttons, but the elevator wouldn't budge. Suddenly, the walls of the elevator began to close in, the metal creaking and groaning as if alive. The space grew smaller and smaller, the air thick with an oppressive heat. They screamed, pounding on the doors, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. Just when they thought they would be crushed, the elevator jolted and began to descend. The walls returned to their original positions, and the oppressive heat dissipated. Gasping for breath, they clung to each other, their hearts racing. The elevator stopped with a shudder, and the doors opened to reveal the ground level of the park. They stumbled out, desperate to escape the nightmare, but as they ran, they were met with a horrifying sight. The park was no longer deserted. Figures stood in the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They were the workers, their bodies twisted and mutilated, expressions of agony etched into their faces. They moved towards Jake and Sarah, their movements jerky and unnatural. "Run!" Jake shouted, pulling Sarah along. They sprinted through the park, the figures closing in around them. The rides began to come to life, their broken machinery whirring and clanking as if mocking their terror. They reached the entrance, but it was blocked by a massive rusted gate. Desperation set in as they searched for another way out. Jake spotted a small maintenance tunnel and pulled Sarah towards it. They ducked inside, their flashlights flickering as they navigated the narrow passage. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each step. Just when they thought they couldn't go any further, they emerged into a small, dimly lit room. In the center stood a man, his back to them. "Please, help us," Sarah begged, her voice trembling. The man turned slowly, revealing a face twisted with anger and pain. His eyes glowed with the same unnatural light as the figures in the park. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice a low growl. Fear rooted them to the spot as the man advanced. But before he could reach them, the ground beneath their feet gave way, and they plunged into darkness. They awoke in the elevator, the doors opening to reveal the entrance of the park. Dazed and shaken, they stumbled out, their minds struggling to comprehend what had happened. The park was silent once more, the shadows still and lifeless. They fled, vowing never to speak of the horrors they had witnessed. But as they reached the safety of their car, they noticed something chilling. Their flashlights were gone, replaced by a small weathered journal, and inside the final entry read, "They will come again. They always do.